Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As I said, I'm really glad you're here today. And we do know that many of you work in systems under constant pressure, limited resources and complex cases, high expectation, and very little space to pause. So I want to be clear from the start that today is not about adding more tasks or expectations. It's about how leadership choices can reduce pressure, not reproduce it. This webinar is the last one. It's number 3 of the webinar series of the Caring 2 Point project. And before we go on, I will introduce Maria Vuksani, who is the project manager on and Tedesom Kosovo, and will give you an overview of the Caring 2.0 project. Maria?
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Before we start, I would like to actually present a few of house rules. Next slide, please. Please note that the duration of today's webinar will be 90 minutes. The language of the webinar will be conducted in English, but you will have translations in Albanian, Bulgarian, and Romanian. Just please click on the globe icon on the bottom. The microphones of all participants will be muted during the webinar. Please note that if you have a technical issue, write in the chat space, whereas all questions related to the content of the webinar will be reflected and answered, taken into account that are put only in Q&A function. Recording of this session will be done for future references. And please note that all materials, including recording, presentation slides, and resources, will be shared after the webinar. Next slide, please. Prior to starting off today's topics of the webinar, let me introduce you to the project Caring 2.0, funded by EU. The project is related to the multidisciplinary prevention and response to school-related violence against children that still remains a significant concern and impacts children all over with varying severity and forms. Evidence from multiple sources do suggest that various forms of violence are present and around schools. While it should be acknowledged that in each national context, legislative, policy and practices advancement has been made towards preventing and responding to violence against children, these measures need to be scaled up to support operationalization of integrated child protection system with the best interest of the child at their center. Hence, building on a successful implementation of previous projects like Revis and Caring, which have been transnational projects, the current Caring 2.0 project aims to contribute to strengthening and functionality of integrated child protection system throughout multidisciplinary prevention of and response to school-related violence, including its gender dimensions and rights-based participation of children, especially those in vulnerable situations. Next slide, please. Just a second. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Oh, okay, sorry. Caring 2.0 is implementing in countries like Bulgaria from our partners SAPI and Association Roditelji, Croatia Brave Phone or Hrabri Telephone, Greece TDH, Hungary TDH, which serves as a role of coordinator, Kosovo and Romania Tertezon. The overall project objective is to enhance the functionality of integrated child protection systems throughout multidisciplinary prevention and response to school-related violence. To achieve these objectives, the project is conceptualized through a social ecological lens that places an emphasis on different layers: individual, family, peers, community, society, and the ways that each layer is affected by and affects the others. To holistically address violence against children, concentrated efforts at different layers of children's social ecologies and implemented throughout a range of mutual reinforcing methodologies to provide a strong basis for disseminating best practices. To address this, of course, trauma-informed care training package for multidisciplinary teams, which is also designed through and with by our dear colleague and expert, Susanna Lutoli. And as a part of this package, this is a series of 3 webinars, which is the third and last webinar organized on trauma-informed care approach and related topics to provide peer-to-peer learning experience. Next slide, please. Caring 2 project contains different methodologies, which is based on caring curricula for school staff and 2 companion tools to caring curricula, which are children and participation and child-led initiatives, bullying, cyberbullying, and bystander attitudes. I support my FRED methodology, trauma-informed care training package for multidisciplinary teams, and operationalization of interagency referral mechanism at school level. We do have within one of the components within this project is child and youth advisory boards, 1 regional and 5 national in each country, that are supported and developed as a tested mechanism to ensure meaningful participation of children in decision-making process that affects their lives. That's all from me for now. We can actually continue with the topics of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for beautifully presenting the project. I, for one, feel very privileged and delighted to have been part of curating the trauma-informed approach. So, across today's sessions, we'll explore trauma-informed leadership, not as a concept, but as an everyday practice. How safety, trust, and accountability are shaped in real organizational life. You'll hear from our colleagues working across Greece and Bulgaria, bringing perspectives from leadership, clinical practice, and organizational culture. You're invited to listen to at your own pace, take what's useful and leave what isn't. And there is no expectation to agree with everything. Curiosity is enough. I will now present Eleftheria Aravidou, Head of Mental Health at the Zone Greece, and our first speaker of today. Eleftheria works at the intersection of leadership, systems, and mental health and brings a grounded understanding of what trauma-informed leadership looks like in practice, especially in complex and demanding environments. As you listen, I invite you to notice how leadership is described not as control, but as a culture setting. So, Eleftheria, you're welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Susanna and Maria, for the introductions. And let me first of all welcome everyone and thank you for making the time to join this webinar and discuss with us around trauma-informed practices in systems and in teams. Next slide, please. So let's start by laying the foundations and create a common understanding about what trauma-informed leadership is. What does it mean? Trauma-informed leadership is an approach, is a compassionate, actually, approach that recognizes how trauma can affect an individual, and at the same time aiming at creating environments that are psychologically safe and they're fostering resilience by prioritizing things like empathy, like trust, like communication and support. So when we lead wearing a trauma-informed lens, we actually try to move beyond standard management, try to address the person as a whole, try to prevent re-traumatization through effective communication and through intentional practices. Actually, it's leading with presence, leading with predictability, and leading with permission, meaning that as a leaders, we try to be self-grounded, to be emotional available and compassionate, and most of all, be calm. To provide to our teams clear expectations, to establish specific routines and follow through our practices. And of course, most of all is about allowing and creating the space for reflections, for feelings to emerge, for tough conversation and discussion to happen, for power and decision-making to be shared in a transparent way. Let me highlight at this point that As a leader, you don't have to be a therapist or a clinical psychologist or having that background to be trauma informed. You just need to lead with honesty. You just need to lead with humanity. Next slide, please. Okay, but why trauma-informed practice? Why trauma-informed leadership is critical? Why do we need to spend time discussing and studying about this? First of all, we all know that trauma shows up in every in workplace and systems. When we people have some lived experience and maybe some traumatic experience, we bring those into the systems that we are participating. So in our workplaces, in our organizations. So trauma-informed leadership actually recognize this reality and try to respond to this reality, not using being judgmental, but rather using empathy and normalizing that trauma doesn't have to be something big. It can be a collection of small things. And of course, we all know that to thrive, people need to experience peace, safety, dignity in their lives. They need to feel respected, they need to feel worthy, they need to feel valued. So trauma-informed leadership actually sets the tones and shapes the emotional climate for this. And actually it creates all the conditions so as for the teams to be able to experience success, to improve, to be engaged. And actually it helps us improve performance, it helps us improve morale, and creates all the conditions for the organizations to thrive. And on the other side, imagine when a leadership ignores actually trauma. This can unintentionally reinforce more fear, more harm, more disengagement. Having uninformed leaders can unintentionally create harm and sometimes even create more harm than the harm created from the original incident. So trauma-informed leadership actually supports what we say sustainable performance, not performance that is based and is driven on fear or judgment. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we want to do is to shift from traditional management for standard management and try to reframing what we already know about managing teams, because trauma-informed leadership is not aiming at controlling things. It actually tries to build trustful relationship, tries to respond in a human-centered way. The trauma-informed leader wears the lens of hope and is able to see the opportunity for growth that comes from an adversity or a difficulty. And actually, leaders should appear as the anchor for their teams, for people that experiencing stress or people that experience some type of imbalance or instability. So when we are feeling anxious and stressed, we are looking for a person that is grounded, that is self-aware, that is not just reactive under stress. And trauma-informed leadership does not focus on performance. Actually tries to connect with the people needs, to attune to the people needs, and work things together as a team. And mistakes are not are accepted. Mistakes are accepted as part of the process, as something normal, and it normalizes actually learning and repair through this process of accepting mistakes. So trauma-informed leadership is related to be more emotional intelligent, let's say, and to approach our teams with more curiosity, to allow feedback to come and actually to utilize feedback for helping people get their power back or get access to information that would be useful for them to thrive, to develop more. Next slide, please. So trauma-informed leadership is not about just applying a strategy, okay? It's more of creating a culture that begins with how leaders regulate, how leaders relate, how leaders demonstrate through their interpersonal behaviors and relationship, how actually they model the weather in the room, because what they model, they can multiply. And actually, if they focus on creating cultures where employers feel valued, feel heard, safe to cope, learn, and grow, even during difficult situation, then all the organization, they create the foundation for the organization, the teams, and the individuals to thrive, to develop, even during difficult circumstances. Next slide, please. So let's try to be a bit practical and see what does modeling safety and trust mean? What are the do and the don'ts, if we can say, or some recommendation. For example, instead of asking your team or questioning why isn't a person performing, you could ask how I can support this person, and realize as a leader that you're not above vulnerability, that you should be honest also with your feelings, to name and regulate your own stress, to be able to engage in difficult conversation, and to show your humanity through this difficult conversation, to be transparent, to be trustful, not to just go silent or cover things up or over promises, and of course not to be judgmental and criticize in front of others, but just lead with humanity. Next slide, please. So let's close this short presentation that introduces us to what trauma-informed leadership actually is, with a self-reflection on where we stand right now. And please feel free to use the chat to put your thoughts about this question. So if you are a leader in your team, if you have this role, please think, what do you model in your team? Maybe sometimes even without realizing. Or if you are a member in a team or a system, you can think, how does your organization reflect all these characteristics that we discussed so far of trauma-informed leadership? And please feel free to put your thoughts on the chat. Thank you so much for your attention. And next slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleutheria. One important thread from what we just heard is leadership always answers an unspoken question for staff. Is it safe to be human here? And trauma-informed leadership doesn't remove pressure, but it changes how pressure is held, which is through clarity, consistency, and relational awareness. Before we move to the second speaker, I'd just like to remind everyone about the Q&A feature in the chat. So we won't be answering any questions in the chat. Anyone who has got any content related questions, there's a Q&A feature and you place your questions there. At the end, we will have a space for answering Q&As, and the speakers and I together will attempt at answering these the best way that we can. I now present to you Dimitris Agorastos, who's a psychologist in Greece. He brings a clinical lens that helps us understand how trauma and chronic stress affect learning, memory, communication, and behavior, not only for service users, but professionals and teams. This perspective is especially important for leaders because it helps shift responses from judgment to understanding. So, Dimitris, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Susanna. Hello, everyone. I want to also thank you for carving out this time from your busy schedules to be here today. So, as Eleutheria already showed, today we're not just looking at some set of slides or a checklist, but we're diving quite deep into the heart of how we function as human beings, how we survive and how we thrive within teams. So when we talk about psychological safety in teams, specifically through the lens of trauma-informed practice, is important to carry something in our minds. In our line of work, whether you work in social services, healthcare, or education, like myself, we carry a lot. We carry the stories of the people we serve. We carry the weight of our expectations, the expectations of our managers, etc. Often we feel that we have to wear this professional mask, if you like. It acts like a shield. And this shield says we have it all together. So, okay, you already moved to the next slide. Okay. So today we're going to explore why safety is not just a soft skill, but it's a biological prerequisite for high-level performance. So first, let's try to define what is psychological safety. Psychological safety is a term that is often misunderstood as everyone being nice or avoiding conflict or something like that. But that's not exactly truth. Psychological safety is the belief that you can show up as human being, not just this professional mask that I mentioned before. And it's the belief that we, as members of one team, we feel safe to take risks. We feel safe to speak up. We can voice our concerns. We can even make mistakes. And we can ask stupid questions without having the fear that you will be punished, you will be judged or shamed. So if we think about this, the cost of silence, it's a social cost. Imagine that you are in a high stakes meeting, for example, and you see a flaw in the plan or whatever. You look around in the room and everyone is just nodding and you feel like something is not wrong. But if you don't feel psychologically safe, your brain does this quick calculation and it says, if I speak up, will I be seen as difficult? Maybe my boss will think that I'm not a team player. What is the cost of me speaking up? So, but this silence is dangerous for many reasons. For example, first, it kills innovation. People offer wild ideas when they feel psychologically safe because they are not afraid of being laughed at. Also, when we are in a psychological safe environment, we can give and receive hard truths because we know the relationship is secure. Also, regarding learning, we treat mistakes not as something bad, but something completely normal, as something that we can, as the data, for example, that needs to be analyzed and not something bad, like a crime to be punished. And of course, psychological safety enhances team cohesion because we stop looking over our shoulders and start looking at the mission at hand. So as this slide says, without psychological safety, people tend to protect themselves, not the mission. If most of our brain power is spent on self-protection, then this brain power is not going toward serving the goals of the team or our clients, the students, etc. So next slide, please. In trauma-informed teams, the discussion moves from management theory into a realm closer to my field, closer to neuropsychology. And this is where things get interesting. In this context, we must remember that emotional safety means performance capacity. Why do we say that? Because the human brain is wired for survival first and logic second. When a staff member feels ashamed, silenced, excluded, the brain doesn't just feel hurt, it reacts like we are in actual physical threat. Our amygdala fires up, the survival brain takes over, and the part of the brain that we use for complex decision-making, empathy, and creative problem-solving literally shuts down. So think about the impact in your work. Imagine a colleague who has just dealt something traumatic with a client or something. If they return to a team environment where they feel judged or where they have to act tough, their nervous system stays on high alert, and this cannot process, this does not help them process the stress. Over time, this leads to chronic reactivity, secondary trauma, and of course, burnout. And this is why we say that we advocate for peer support and safe supervision as forms of co-regulation. Next slide, please. So let's try and see what psychological safety sounds like, because it's something that we cannot easily find in a handbook, for example. Actually, you find it everywhere in the office, in your work environment. It's something in the air. You will hear the sound of repair and honesty in the environment. In a psychological safe team, people don't hide their humanity, but they lead with humanity. They listen for phrases like those that we see in the slide here. Thank you for your feedback. I will sit with you. I will sit with that. I'm not sure how to do this, but can someone here in the team support me? I don't agree, but I feel safe saying that here. So it's normal conversation. It's about the tone that someone has in his voice. It's about showing empathy at the end of the day. Next slide, please. So building this culture of empathy doesn't happen by accident. It requires some work and some intentional construction across different things. Here we see 5 very important pillars of trauma-informed team culture. First one is safety. And this is like the foundation, the bedrock. And what we mean by safety is safety, relational safety, emotional safety, and this comes before everything else. The second pillar is trust, and this is not just a vibe. It is built, it's something that is built in the smallest moments through consistency, clarity, and follow through. It's doing what you said you will do when you said you will do it. The third pillar is collaboration. This is about power sharing. It means that making sure that every voice in the room matters, whatever they have been there for 20 minutes or 20 years, doesn't matter. The next pillar, the fourth one, is empowerment. We give people all ownership over their specific roles in the team. We give them choices, which is the direct opposite of how trauma operates in a way. And the last pillar, but also extremely important, is support. And this brings us to the quote that you see here. Teams tend to grow up when they feel seen and not just measured. If our only interaction with our staff, with our team, is about deadlines, metrics, etc., then we are treating human beings in the office like machines. Machines cannot have trauma, don't have trauma, but human beings do carry trauma. So when we see the effort behind all this output, when we acknowledge the stress and the difficult cases that we handle, then we build a culture that is resilient enough to survive all difficulties or storms that are coming. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk a bit about where this culture lives on a daily basis. It lives on supervision. In many systems, supervision is like a policing, a place where you go to prove that you've done your work, you've done your paperwork, and you did your part. But in a trauma-informed system, supervision is about relations, is a relational container in a way. It is a place where every staff member can finally put their heavy bags down. It's where we normalize the fact that this work that we do is difficult, and that's okay. It's where we say it's okay to be uncertain. It's okay to be overwhelmed, and someone will be here to support you. As we like to say, supervision can be where people breathe again, not where people hold their breath. And think about this. If your team is studying outside your office, holding their breath, their bodies are in a state of stress. They cannot reflect, they cannot learn. But if they walk into their room with their shoulders drop and they take a long exhale, then that is where the real work happens. And that's when we move from being reactive to being reflective. And as leaders, those who are leaders, their job is to provide exactly that exhale for the team. So next slide, please. To wrap up our time together, I want us to move from theory into something more personal. So we talk already about biology, we talk about the pillars, we talk about the tone in the language and how we speak. But at the end of the day, psychological safety starts with us. So I want you to ask yourself, what is this one thing that makes a team feel safe to you? Take a moment, think about this question. It can be anything. Maybe it's the way a colleague listens to you without looking at their phone, or it's the way that the mistake can be handled with curiosity instead of blame, or a simple smile and something like someone saying to you, "Hello, how are you doing today? Are you okay?" Before you go into a meeting. It doesn't need to be something big, and that's something that I want you to take home as a message. Whatever this one thing that you came up with is, I encourage you to take it back to your team tomorrow and use it. You don't need like a huge plan or a grand new policy to start being trauma informed. You just need a moment of presence and willingness to see the human being that you have in front of you, to see the team as human beings with feelings and needs. And I think that's all for today for me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for the work that you do every day.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. That was amazing, and I'd like to give a minute for people to answer how safe do they feel in their teams? What makes their workplace safe? So we've got empathy when the team leader takes responsibility and actually leads.
Yeah.
Someone saying the ability to speak up and to be heard, to be
Yeah.
understood. That's a very good signal of safety within teams. Clear expectations and boundaries, solidarity,
Very good points.
the ability to listen and understand and be understood, space and respect for different opinions. We again have empathy, which empathy is at the core of the trauma-informed approach.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
good to see those answers. Thank you all for your contributions. And again, thank you, Dimitris.
Thank you.
A key takeaway here is that when systems ignore stress and trauma, people don't just become more resilient, they become more reactive. Trauma-informed leadership recognizes that emotional safety is not separate from performance. Emotional safety enables performance. And when we talk about psychological safety, it is the difference between people protecting themselves and people committing to the work. When psychological safety is present, people don't hide mistakes, they surface them early when learning and repair are still possible. So we will move to the third topic of our webinar. Our next contribution comes from the SAPI Bulgaria team with Anna Krantova and Boris Lambrev will be speaking together, one after the other. They will share practical insight from organizational and clinical work, including how trauma-informed principles show up in supervision, in language, and everyday interaction. As you listen, I invite you to pay attention to the small shifts, the things that don't require new programs, but different choices. So I now hand it over to you, Anna.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Susanna, for the introduction. Me. So we present the third topic today, embedding trauma-informed principle in system and practice. So the next slide, please. So first, trauma-informed care is not a one-time session. It's a culture shift embedded into systems, policies, practice, and language. So, how are people welcome? How is conflict handled? What do your forms, protocols, and policies communicate? The next slide, please. So, people don't feel safe because we say so. They feel safe because we show so. And if you talk about trauma-informed care principles, live in organizations, I present some of examples from SAPI. So the next slide, please. So staff meetings, or how voices are invited, not just decisions made in our organization. The second trauma-informed care principle is supervision, a focus on meaning and process, not only performance. The third trauma-informed care principle is a physical environment, separate resting areas, less stress for staff. And the fourth, discipline and conflict in our organization, communication with acceptance of different points of view, without judgment, support from directors. So the next slide, please. Now I talk for the language that heals versus language that harms. So if you talk about language, in traditional language, I made some examples for this. If you talk about non-compliant client, we can transform in trauma-informed language like a person struggling with safety or control. So the language is more important part of trauma-informed care. So, or the other example, aggressive behavior. In trauma-informed language, that sounds protective response to stress or fear, or at risk young facing systematic and relational adversity in trauma-informed language. So we don't have time for this traditional language. Will be sounds in trauma-informed language like let's slow down and do this right. So in our work, the next slide, please. Thank you. In our work, we are guided by approaches that look beyond behavior, and focus on meaning, context, and subjective experience. This means that we look at trauma in the context of the subjective experience. Therefore, trauma is really unique for each person and have different meaning for each individual. So every professional be must be must be uh, understand that and uh, mm, to translate or to understand that trauma is really unique for each person and everyone have different meaning. So, for example, for one aggressive client, we wonder why he's aggressive and don't judge the behavior, don't just name it aggressive. We look beyond behavior and labels. So, this way of thinking translates into our language and terminology, which shows how we think about clients and ourselves. So, um, being trauma informed does not mean uh, constantly labeling people as traumatized. It means staying attuned to meaning. Sorry for next slide, please. Um, yes, thank you. The meaning, dignity, and agency while avoiding language that fixes people in victim identities. For us, victimization prevention is really important. Therefore, we prefer not to accentuate the trauma and use language that is oriented by the subjective needs of each individual. So, the next slide, please, and my colleague Boris will be continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Welcome, Boris.
Hello, Susanna. So, previous slide, please. Yeah, I would like to ask everyone to answer in chat on to this question. This is a way to think and to step back from this presentation way of doing this webinar and to just to reflect and sit back and think what's one thing you can shift, change, or sustain in your team or system to embed trauma-informed principles. So take your time and think what can you change to be more trauma-informed, to be more aware of other people's emotions, of their feelings, of what they carry with them.
We started having some reflections here,
Okay, should I go on?
checking how people feel regularly. Someone saying mental safety, speak
Yeah,
openly.
speak openly, yeah.
Yeah,
Become aware about the impact of trauma on daily activities. Also mental safety, I see.
yeah.
So those are all good concepts that can help us embed space, also emotions regulations. Yeah, this is very important. If we are able to regulate our emotions during work time, this will help us be more aware of the other person, be more aware of our own options to reflect and not to react, look beyond behavior and label like Anna said, yeah, be more aware that something is behind someone's behavior. Staff and clients learn it's safe to speak up, struggle, and ask for help.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very important because all of us that work in the caring professions, so be it educational or mental health or social services, we have to keep in mind that people actually come to us with their suffering, and people suffer, which can be a great load on us, and which can also uh, which we also need to keep in mind in order not to label and to think that those people are actually people who suffer, who have their own difficulties. What else can I see? Work balance for mental health, create space for conversations and share emotions. Yeah, exactly. Maybe I should go on. So please, next slide. So these are some examples. All that you commented in the chat, I thank you very much. Here are some examples that I would like to add to what you already said. So add grounding to team check-ins. This can be very useful to start or to end the session, a team meeting in a more relaxed way. Protect time for reflection or supervision. As we mentioned, supervision is a very powerful tool to be ourselves, to express our emotions, and as Dimitrios said, to breathe and not to stop breathing. So to take some of that load and to share it with others who can support us and be of help to us. Staff meetings where everyone can express himself, herself. This is also very important. So our organization where everyone feels safe enough to speak freely is an organization which holds well the trauma-informed principles. Welcoming and dedicated staff for staff physical environment. This is also very important because our space, the space that we work, the space that we live needs to help us feel safe and to feel secure and to be able to express ourselves. So dedicated physical environment is also very important. Good environment that is protective, that is, if I might say, that is new, so some renovation, so it's a nice environment to work, help us feel better. In conflicts, this is also very important. And last but not least, when there are conflicts in the team, the directors and also the staff managers should focus on resolution and the dynamics of the team. So not to blame people, but actually to find a solution that's acceptable to everyone and to see what caused the conflict, not who caused the conflict. So this is very important in order to, so to speak, to not blame no one and to share responsibility, and also to share to share the emotions, to share the experience about what happened. Next slide, please. One point that is very important is that I mentioned also is the creating of reflective spaces. So why does it matter? Without the space to reflect, we burn out or become reactive. We stop being in tune with ourselves. We stop being in tune with others. We stop reflecting and we become reactive. So when there is aggressor, not there is aggressor, when there is an aggressive client, it's much easier to put the blame and to label than to reflect and think, what is this person actually bringing here and why is bringing it? Trauma-informed systems create brave spaces for honest dialogue. So this is burnout prevention. This is a space where everyone can express himself or herself, where everyone can speak freely to share things that are in the work process, but also outside of the work process, things that are important to each individual, be it personal life or something else. This is a place where anyone can just share and be himself, herself. Um, the normalization of uncertainty and mistakes is also very important because we are all people, we are all uncertain, and we all make mistakes. No one is perfect. No one knows all the answers, but we all need a time to accept this and to be able to integrate it and to work with it and to keep in mind that uncertainty is okay to be uncertain, is okay to make mistakes. One other example from our work in SAPI is that we have a lot of trainings, so we prioritize collective learning over perfection. This is important to think that we don't have to achieve we have to achieve some goals, but have to keep in mind that we also learn and grow, and that it's a process of development as we as organization develop and we as individuals develop, because those are our lives, and our we as whole persons are integrated into this work system and into this life. Next slide, please. So some ideas about reflective spaces could be peer learning circles, story-based team debriefs, and dedicated pause time in busy periods. Everything that enables us to pause and to get grounded and to be in tune with ourselves, just to relax, to share, and to stop for the moment stop the whole process and just say, okay, now I need some 5 minutes for myself, and be alone if you need to be, or be with other people if you need to be, but just to be happy and to be able to take a pause. Next slide, please. So this is the end of the presentation. I like to thank you all from myself. I'm not ending this webinar, but I like to tell you all to thank you all for coming here, for being here, for sharing this experience. Our closing thoughts are that small actions create big shifts. So trauma-informed practice is not an additional workload. It's not something that we have to do, that we think we should do. It's a new set of tasks. It's the application of Samsa's principles in everyday interactions. So everything that we talked here in the 3 webinars about being honest, being kind, sharing, being accepting our own insecurities and uncertainties, and keeping in mind that we all carry traumas in this, and for everyone it's not so easy, and to keep a positive idea of what's going on, to be able to cope with life. Uh, everything everything that we apply and this mindset that we use, this is the trauma-informed practice. These are the Samsa's principles, and they translate into things that into how we lead, how we communicate, and how we respond when things are difficult. To conclude, what is important, what we need, is a moment of presence, a willingness to repair, a culture that values relationship over reaction. So maybe to summarize, that we need to reflect and not react. And one closing thought that I would like to see your answers in the chat is the question on the bottom of the screen. What's one thing you'll do differently tomorrow? If you want to share it, share it. If you don't want to share it, keep it for yourselves. But this is, if we are able to change our lives for the better, it will make the whole world better. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Boris and Anna, both of you. This was amazing. What stands out here is the trauma-informed practice is not about labels or specialized language. It's about how people are treated in moments of uncertainty, conflict, or pressure. These are the moments where culture is either reinforced or repaired. And we also talked about language. And we need to remember that language is not neutral in teams. It either regulates people or pushes them into protection. So the main message that we've had throughout the training is about having curiosity and approaching situations with empathy. Whether it's the clients we work with or the colleagues we're supporting, it's about changing the narrative from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And this goes a long way in creating psychological safety in teams. In trauma-informed teams, how we speak matters as much as what we decide. Blaming language shuts learning down. Curious language keeps people engaged and accountable. Under pressure, language becomes culture. Leaders model whether safety or fear is the default position. Trauma-informed language, another thing to remember, it doesn't remove accountability. It creates the conditions where accountability is possible. We will now open the floor for some questions and answers. We have few questions in our Q&A, and if more people want to ask questions, please use the Q&A section for any content-related questions. So now I invite the panel to open the cameras. Thank you all. And if any of you have had any questions in the chat that you would like to answer, please go ahead. Yes, Eleftheria?
Yes, actually, I found really interesting the question that Anbessa addressed. How can we implement trauma-informed leadership in the real ground with the least budget allocation of governments towards to mental health? It is just 2%. And this is actually a data that comes from the latest report of WHO about funding allocated on mental health. So I think it's a very close to real situation question. So, and I just would like to comment a bit on that there are really constraints, there are really real constraints towards mental health services. So it's not a priority for many societies. We all know that mental health is underfunded. But if we want to see this statement in relation to the trauma-informed practice, we should think that we are not aiming at adding more mental health services, but we want to embed psychologically safety policies in the systems. So we can start by working with ourselves, with our behaviors as leaders and teams and staff, where the cost is zero, at least the financial cost, okay, but not the sentimental cost. We can use the existing frameworks that we have, the existing meetings, and just inform them with trauma practices. We can have internal trainings to cascade this knowledge. We can, as our colleagues said, we can provide teams with options, with choices, and creating all this psychological safety. And our colleagues provided some very nice practical ideas of how we can do it. So I do understand that mental health is underfunded, but we should see how we can actually not view the trauma-informed practice as an additional mental health service. That is what I would like to comment. Thank you, Susanna. And thanks the colleague for the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eleftheria. That was a really good answer. In the time, in trauma-informed approach, when we talk about shifts and changes in the way we do things, usually they don't cost. Being kind, it doesn't cost. Acknowledging the pressures of resources, of whether it's staff shortages, whether it's financial resourcing. It's not about changing those mechanisms because we can't as individuals or teams. That's not to say we don't fight for changing those, but the focus is on how can we make this easier and more humane by adding pressure and feeling pressure from these lack of resources. There's a huge risk of running that pressure, projecting that pressure into our staff, and the staff will then pass on the pressure and the stress to the clients. It's about acknowledging the constraints and taking a human approach, not blaming approach, providing reflective time to acknowledge and to talk about the pressures that we're facing. That's what being trauma-informed care means. And understanding that, for example, a school teacher working with limited resources and 30 plus students, it's not an easy place to be. It's about naming, acknowledging, and offering support within the constraints that we have. And it's about other people hearing us, acknowledging these, making it safe and making it empowering environment. So any of the other panelists would like to answer another question? If you just give us a bit of time, because we've been speaking and not had much time to look at the questions.
So maybe I can answer the other question, Susanna, if you can fill in if I miss something. But I see
Yeah,
one question is, how can a leader create psychological safety in a traumatized workforce?
yeah, please go ahead.
The leader's role is very important because this is the person who sets the pace and who everyone looks up to. So this is very important for him to be trauma informed and to think about all these relational aspects that we were talking about, and about the fact that everyone carries some difficulties within himself. So exactly how can he create psychological safety is by the policies that he applies on his workforce, by the way he structures their day, the way he makes the staff meetings, the way he makes safety spaces or doesn't, and also most importantly, I think by his attitude. If his attitude is generally compassionate and kind, and thinking about the difficulties that his staff is struggling with, I think this can bring a positive change in the workforce. Also, the other things that we say, supervision and so on. So this is a must, of course.
Thank you, Boris. I would just add to that some leadership behaviors that for who not maybe not all of us are leaders, and maybe not all of us supervise and manage other people, but if we do, there's quite few behaviors we can apply in, and if we're talking about specifically traumatized workforce. So consistency and transparency. If we are consistent in our behaviors, meetings, approaches, it's very helpful because uncertainty is more often more triggering than the difficulty itself. Normalizing help-seeking behaviors and mistakes. So when we are faced with someone who's seeking help from us, we don't judge or shame them for not knowing what they're supposed to be knowing. We respond with curiosity and accountability, not shame. Listening without rushing to fix. Very often, when someone approaches us for help, we rush into fixing the situation, offering advice, offering solutions. If we're being trauma informed, it's really important to help people feel heard, because feeling heard helps people regulate. And as our colleagues mentioned earlier, using supervision and check-ins as spaces for support, not just performance. And most importantly, it's modeling regulation. When we talk about trauma-informed approach, it's about modeling what we would like to see in others. So we ourselves might have our own challenges and difficulties, but we need to take the time and have the ability to regulate ourselves, because regulation happens in relationships. If you are regulated, you will help the other person regulate. So these are kind of like the behaviors of the leader who is trauma informed. And that safety is not is built through everyday repeated interactions, not just one-off statements. So thank you very much to all of you. We've got more questions here. Anyone else would like to answer any? Someone asking about, yes, so I've got two questions from the same person. Someone saying, are there any pilot programs or case studies from Albania that show measurable impact of trauma-informed interventions? I wouldn't have the exact answer for the Albania as a country. We've had trainees from Albania, we've had some, and I know that work is being done on the ground to implement trauma-informed in the care professions, but that's not something we can answer correctly in this platform. The second question was, just bear with me because it's taking me from moving from screen to screen. And there was another interesting one. Are there examples of curricula or teaching methodologies in the EU that have been successfully adapted in schools to integrate trauma-informed approaches? I can say with confidence that in quite a few European countries, trauma-informed approach is embedded into schools. There's in UK, for example, where I've done most of my training and work, Trauma Informed Council, there is a big campaign coming from the Wave Trust 7030, which aims to reduce the traumatic effect on children by 70% in the period of 10 years. Trauma-informed schools, because trauma-informed care and trauma-informed practice can be applied to every organization, be it a charity, a government body, a local authority, or even private businesses. It links with emotional intelligence of leaders and how important it is that we lead in a human way and create human environments that empower children in schools or in other services. So yes, there are many initiatives going ahead, and there are a lot of curricula and programs tailored to schools, as it is this training that we've done. This was as a response to preventing violence in schools and equipping the school staff and professionals who work with children to be trauma-informed and to have better outcomes for children that we support with in our everyday work. Other questions? Okay, so unless I'm not seeing well, I'm not seeing other questions in the Q&A section. And I've got some questions in the chat. I've got a very interesting questions. How can a manager, I just lost it. It was, can I ask all the people that put questions in the chat to put them onto the Q&A section? Because of so many chats happening, I'm losing the questions. They're going further up, and it's taking too much time to scroll through them. So the question was about how do managers apply trauma-informed conversation when they're restructuring and they have to lack of funds or ending of funds and they have to fire so many people. And from personal experience, I've been into that position, and it's not about not firing people, it's about honesty and transparency and kindness. How you fire someone or how you tell someone that there's no longer funds to fund their workplace matters more than the action that you do. And as organizations, there are many processes that can be implemented in situations like this, when there's either a restructure, consultation, inclusion, including people in deciding what happens with the funds, where do the funds get next allocated, are just some of the few processes that can be put in place. And taking the pain of the people seriously. It's not about not telling them what's going on, but it's about doing it with kindness and empathy. Because we will be in situations where things have to be done. We will be in situations where we will need to manage performance of people, but how we do it and the approach that we take matters sometimes more than the action that we're taking. Okay, so there's another one. How do we develop organizational culture? Most of the time praise intelligence over emotional intelligence. Care in teams takes emotional intelligence, which needs to be cultivated. What are the ways to develop personal emotional intelligence beyond going to therapy? So, as we have reiterated quite a few times, trauma-informed care is not therapeutic approach. It's not therapy in itself. Again, we're going to come back to the human, to empathy, to curiosity. How can we create such environments where we value emotional intelligence? It's interesting because it's not much talked about it. It doesn't go very much into our supervision records or appraisal records. That's why we are having this webinar today. It's about making it part of the evaluation and part of the appraisals or performance appraisals that we do. How emotionally intelligent we are, how we respond to people, how we respond to our colleagues, and how we manage our staff should all be part of the performance evaluation. And organizations and managers can do that by implementing into supervision policies, into appraisals processes, and taking that into account and evaluating someone on their relationships, on their kindness with other people, on the willingness to help and be there for another. That's a very good question. It's asking about immigration, and I will read it in a minute. It's just because the writing is so slow, it's so small, and I'm struggling to see it. So he's saying, to what extent have trauma-informed approaches or models been applied in cases involving children and their families seeking international protection or asylum? Are there any statistics or examples on how many cases have been handled during these practices? Is there anyone who'd like to help me answer this question? Because it's a tricky one and it differs from country to country. And with the current climate globally around migration and around some of the horrible practices we're seeing, how immigrants are dealt with, I would say at the top of my head, there's not much trauma-informed approaches going on there. However, only UK experience is most of the work is done by NGOs. Once immigrant families kind of are settled into the community, local authority together with NGOs do provide trauma-informed care, do provide care and support in a trauma-informed way. However, it's a very emotionally charged question and politically charged question currently because of everything we're seeing on the news with how that's dealt with. So I wouldn't like to go more in depth into that. Have we got any more questions? How do we improve team behavior? Because it is noticed that even a lot of training that do not change themselves, after the training, they become the same they were. So the question is quite interesting. We heard from our colleagues earlier about team behavior and modeling and accountability. Does anyone want to answer that? Perhaps Eleftheria, Dimitris, Boris. How do we improve team behavior. Yeah.
I can add my comment, and colleagues can also complete me. Indeed, we have the expectation to just run a training or apply a training, and things magically will change. But this sometimes does not happen, because to my understanding and to my experience, applying trauma-informed practices is related to how well you are attuned to your needs, and how you allow yourself to be connected and attuned to other people's needs. So it takes a lot of personal work for this to be done. And it doesn't happen overnight, because I attended a training. So it's something that should be built slowly and take it step by step, and not letting your team, let's say, collapse if something difficult happens, but try to bring back the balance and not let everything collapse. So I think we should move away from this expectation that after learning about these things or after discussing about things will change. But let's try to envision a framework and organization institution where small changes happen every day, and this builds this culture setting that we talked about. It's not about something, a strategy that I will apply and magically everything will change. It needs work to be done. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I also add something?
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that many trainings fail is because training is a cognitive process, like we think about things, we analyze things, etc. But the behavior also involves the biological part that I mentioned in my presentation as well. And also behavior is a cultural thing as well. So what I mean by that is that if we return to an environment that nothing that remains the same, then of course it takes a lot of time, as Eleftheria said, to change things, because our brain will shift to this survival mode, and in the first time that we will be back and someone will judge us, then we will have, for example, high pressure, or we will lose our words, and then we will go to survival mode. So I think what helps to change this kind of environment is modeling, for example, from a team leader or someone who has some kind of responsibilities in this environment to act in a trauma-informed manner. For example, when he wants to see if a task is done, first he can ask about, not about the task itself, but about the feelings of people. How are you, Susanna, today? I see you are stressed. And maybe, by having this kind of conversation, will have a shift in the environment as well, because people will think, okay, this leader doesn't think about the final goal only, but sees me as a human being with feelings, and so I can feel a bit safer to talk about how stressed I am, because I'm really struggling to achieve something here.
If I could add also that what we should do is focus on the process and the dynamics in the team, not so much on whose fault it is. So yeah, we should think what's going on with this team, what's happening, why is it working like this, why is it behaving like this, and not to see whose fault it is. So this is very important in order to be more trauma informed and to think about the emotions that people carry.
Focusing on learning rather than blaming. Okay, so I think we're coming to the end of our webinar. I'd just like to leave you with some closing thoughts. As we close today, I want to return to something very simple. Trauma-informed leadership is not about having perfect system or unlimited resources. It's about how we show up in everyday moments, how we listen, how we explain decisions, how we respond under pressure, and how willing we are to repair when things go wrong. If there's one thing to take away from today, let it be this. Small, consistent leadership choices shape safety, trust, and engagement over time. You don't need to do everything different from tomorrow. Just one thing, a little more intentionally. Thank you for all the work that you do, for all the questions that you've had, and thank you to our panelists. And now we will move on to Maria for a few more minutes to close and to put the survey up.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for actually being a part of this wonderful journey that has started last year in November with the first webinar, where we have explored creating safe and compassionate spaces through grounded trauma-informed principles in everyday interactions. We have seen why trauma-informed care matters and what are the SAM principles, emotional and physical safety and co-regulation, avoiding re-traumatization and microactions. Then we have developed and gone through the second of our webinar with understanding the behaviors as communication and responding with awareness. We have seen how development trauma works and what is mentalization. We have gone through emotional regulation and cycle of influence, and cycle of influence, what we can and we cannot control. I would like to thank all that have been part of this journey, including the panelists from all three webinars that we had, the support team, Susanna as our driving force, and also let's not forget our translators, wonderful translators that have bared with us throughout this journey. All recordings from these three webinars of this series of webinars are available and will be available in the Child Hub for who is interested to actually go through and listen to what was discussed and what was talked about and what were the topics that have been discussed and basically explored. Thank you all. You do have a poll on the screen and would like to ask you kindly to take a few minutes to fill in the poll before we close up. Thank you all. Dear all, thank you again and have a nice rest of the day and the evening. Thank you. Goodbye.